Okay, so one thing I'm going to go through with regard to presence of mind, and in a subsequent video, I'm going to cover, context, but is within the body, you know, a big part of us having the confidence of what we can do is what we feel we are capable of in the body. This is one of the reasons why physical conditioning, physical development, both developing your muscles and also, of course, developing your neurology is so crucial. I can tell you, one of the things that I see a lot of, and to the credit of the Jeet Kune Do folks, and the early Jeet Kune Do folks, and the emphasis on physical development, to the credit of boxers and sport fighters, to the credit of MMA, to the credit of Muay Thai, the reintroduction, and of course, competitive karate, competitive taekwondo, the reintroduction of the concept and idea that you got to develop your body in a real fight. And granted, in a real self-defense situation, okay, you're not going 15 rounds, you're not going 3 rounds in the octagon for, whatever, 5-minute rounds. But the point is, if your body is not primed, we'll say, for certain things, very hard to make stuff work under duress. And so one of the things I like to do in all my training is I like to use weighted objects. I've discussed this before, but probably not as well as maybe I would like to. And that is, I like to use the weighted objects because one of the things with a weighted object, number one, it forces you to move your body correctly. Also, too, the weight kind of gives your brain something to do, something to focus on as you're moving with it. The other thing I like is because it's an easy way to internally, as I'm moving, practice how I move my body and do certain things, how I develop certain attributes. And what I want to say is this, so for as far as physical fitness is concerned, because people always ask me, what do I do? Look, I'm 61 years old, and I'm actually, within height and weight standards of the Marine Corps again, so I'm kind of happy about that. I can actually fit my uniforms still, but I only work on basic stuff. I do basic weightlifting, almost all dumbbell stuff, because I like to be able to balance it out properly. I'm not saying that I have anything against straight bar stuff, but I prefer to use my dumbbells these days. But the other thing I do is I just do basic exercises when it comes to weightlifting, just to make sure that my muscles are strong enough on a very basic general level, so that if I'm throwing uppercuts, because I do enough curling, I'm not going to probably tear a muscle when I'm, throwing a punch or an uppercut on somebody as hard as I can. The other thing I like to do is then I like to do calisthenics type of exercises just to help with my mobility, but also just the ability to be able to pick yourself up off the ground. I think it's kind of a lost art in our culture, and you're seeing a lot of the fitness gurus now and I'm glad they're doing this stuff, by the way, reintroducing the importance of mobility and calisthenics and just controlling your body. Ito Portal has some of his best stuff out there. If you get a chance, I don't get anything out of this. I don't even know the guy, but I'm a follower of his on YouTube. But watch his videos because he gets into this stuff. And I'm not saying everything he does is, specific to, self-defense, but the point is the mindset is definitely on. The other thing I like to do, kind of in the Ito Portal way, is I like to take basic movements and make kind of games out of it. And the reason I do that stuff is the ball, as I'm moving back and forth, this is kind of a little isolation drill that I teach students and I have my instructors do with people. And what it does is it allows me to learn how to manipulate the space between myself and, say, another person. But the idea is I'm also developing that interoception, that coordination, that timing, so that as I'm stepping in this direction or stepping in a different direction, everything that I need to do from here to here has to happen before that foot lands in order for me to control my body as I'm timing it with the ball. The other thing I like to do is kind of almost like a tool replacement drill. And I take a kettlebell. This is, I think, like some plastic 15-pound thing. It's like filled with sand or cement, I don't know. But anyway, and what I do is same idea, only I switch off. So as I push from the root, I'm concentrating on this transition. And if you'll notice what I'm doing here, let me slow down so I can explain this. As I'm pushing from the root, this hand is barely touching underneath. And just as it touches, I let the kettlebell slip into the other hand. So as I go back and forth, now some people say, well, why don't you just do this? Well, I do that, but the reason I do this is there's a timing that I'm developing when I'm tool replacing. And the reason is, as I'm tool replacing, because I always know where my hands are, what I found is, even if I get a little touch, even if it's almost touching my hand, my timing is never off when I do my transition. And then I try to apply that same transition skill to, tool replacing from my hand to my elbow, to my body and back. It's just a concept, it's just an idea, but what I'm doing is as I'm fooling around with the kettlebell, I'm developing my body, I'm developing my touch, I'm developing my timing for my step, and then I just start mixing it up and doing different things, stepping all over the place, just to add some variety to it. Another thing I like to do, and I stole these from my wife, is I take like these little weights, these are like 2 pounds, but what I do is I practice moving and fighting and throwing punches with these. And what I'm doing is relaxing the hand as much as possible. And Bruce Lee had it right when he talked about when you're throwing a punch, it should feel like you're grabbing onto a bar at the last moment. And what I'm doing here is I'm relaxing the hand and I'm actually feeling the snap and I'm catching the weight as I'm doing this. And what I'm doing is I'm just trying to train a response where my hand becomes so relaxed that there's no antagonistic muscle in the arm. And then at the right moment, at the point of impact, just as I'm penetrating, and then I make the fist. So this is a good way in which I practice that. And then I do other types of stepping, other types of hits. Why do I do that? Because all that stuff then feeds into my presence of mind. Me knowing that I can hit and move at supernatural speed, at close range, and hit people with control is more important to me than being able to freaking, step and have some haymaker of a punch. And the reason is, the faster I can move because of action reaction, the harder it is for you to deal with it, especially at close range, because at a certain range, even if you see it or feel it, you really can't respond fast enough. So I do these things with weights to help reinforce the kind of movement I want to achieve. And of course, yes, I do practice without the weight because it's a different feel, but I use weighted objects to kind of achieve that, because it all feeds into, if I know I have the ability to move with a ball back and forth, throwing punches, whatever the case may be, and transitioning, I know that when I'm dealing with a person and I have to clear their hands, it's much easier because I have more points of reference. Plus, when I'm moving with another person, their motion also kind of aids in my ability to get offline from things because they're trying to hit me or they're moving toward me, whatever the case may be. So I also play off of their movement. But again, if you train, whether you're training on your own or you're training with a person, if you're not training in the right context with the right presence of mind of what you're capable of and what other people are capable of, you're doing yourself a disservice. The truth is, with Warrior Flow, we don't really care what other people do. We don't care. I don't care what other arts do. What I do care about, though, is helping people, regardless of what they study, to move as efficiently in their body as possible, so that whatever they do it with a level of mastery, that subconscious competence where there is no thought, that Wu Wei, effortless effort. Because what I find is, I've kind of come 180 degrees on this. I used to be also, like a lot of people, thinking my Kung Fu was better than other people's Kung Fu. Over the years, I've realized it's stupid. It's a stupid way to think, and the reason is human movement is human movement. Me throwing a punch or an uppercut, whatever strike I'm throwing, this strike here, this hammer fist, is no different than karate or Kung Fu or Taekwondo. This uppercut is no different than in boxing, Taekwondo, kickboxing, or just some guy walking down the street and just uppercutting people and sending them to the moon, like on the Honeymooners. The point is Bruce Lee said it best. Before I knew karate and Kung Fu, a punch was just a punch. A kick was just a kick. After I learned karate and kung fu, a punch was still just a punch, a kick was still just a kick. The point he was making was like, yeah, you know, there's only so many ways you can extend your leg to kick somebody. Now, there are different ways in which you can set it up. There are different ways in which you can position your body. But at the end of the day, a kick in the balls is a kick in the balls is a kick in the balls. And that's kind of the point. And so when you develop the proper presence of mind within the proper context, as you're practicing, as you're training, as you're using different objects, and you want to be creative. You know, the reason I call this series Stuff I Like to Do is because it's stuff I like to do. But there may be things that you like to do that for whatever reason gives your body the most challenge, or the challenge you're looking for, that's developing the attributes you feel that you're weakest at. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's within the laws of physics and human physiology. And of course, it makes sense, you know. And so what I mean by that is, listen, if you can run off walls and kick people in the head, more power to you. I can't do that. However, if it makes no sense to do that in a real fight, in a certain situation or a context, then don't do it. It's just that simple. So as you're practicing, if that's an important skill for you to have, then practice it. I don't know, and I don't know what you do on the weekend, but if it's not an important skill, then don't practice it, you know? So hopefully, come here, you spoiled thing. Hopefully that gives you an idea of the kind of things you want to do. This is my dog Boyd here. You know, I should be like a James Bond kind of like villain with this guy, right? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So hopefully this gives you a better understanding of the kind of stuff that you want to be thinking about. And eventually with this series, start kind of creating stuff you like to do.